I'm not sure how to phrase it. I'm trying to be as like real as possible.
Yeah.
So I'll just say
Have we spoken before?
last week,
We
just
did.
by text because the video wasn't working, remember?
Ah, yeah.
And you said about, like I said, how there's like a black hole when I try to look in, and you said to, and I said all this junk comes up,
Yeah.
and you said you need to die to that a million times if
Yeah.
you know. And
Well,
I've been thinking about that a lot. But I think for me, the only thing I care about, to be honest, is that I just want a safe space to stand away from the bad stuff that happens in life, or I want to disappear so there's no one here to be
yeah. Yeah.
who suffers from it. To be honest, like I don't care about the truth. I just want to be safe, and I know
Yeah.
I can't be.
Yeah.
I don't know what to do.
Yeah. Well, there is safety in that I am and in seeing who you truly are, because that's never born or dies and is never affected by anything. But in the human world, which is where you're looking for safety, there is no safety. In the human world, everything always moves. So you have to find that which never moves. And this is where home is.
That sounds so tricky because this is all so loud.
Yeah.
You know, this world, this appearance, and the emotions and the thoughts.
Is there anything that you could perceive in any way that's always present? That always is, even though everything else comes and goes?
I don't know. You know, I've talked to other teachers, and they've actually gotten frustrated with me because they're like, "Well, surely you know that you're here, right?" And I'm like, "I don't know." And then he's like, "Well, I don't know what to tell you then." And I'm like, "Oh crap, I don't know what that means."
Okay. So then we have to go into the psychology of why that's happening in you. So, because the person resisting, or the behavior that you're displaying in response to the non-dual message, will just be the response of the personality, which is set up a
Yeah.
certain way. So what part of your personality is resisting this? And this will be something that you'll be able to see as a pattern, the way you respond to people. So at the moment, I get the sense that your response is no.
To no to what question?
To things. Maybe it's changing, but you've got your response is keep back, keep it out, keep it out. And I presume that's your pattern in relationships, in job, in lots of circumstances. Although don't let me put words in your mouths, because this psychologically, in terms of psychology, this would be like me pushing my ideas onto you. So you've got to go and investigate if this is true. But sometimes it's so much easier for me to just say it than to try and get you to say it. But I could try to get you to say it more. I could be. So why? What is the response? So your response to it when somebody's asking you about that investigation, what is the feeling that comes up in your body?
Well, it's peace, but I don't see any. The question is, like the sense of self or whatever. It just doesn't appear that there is one. There's just thoughts.
Yeah.
It doesn't seem like there's anyone here.
Yeah, there isn't. But that's not satisfactory to you. That's disturbing in some way, or.
Yeah, I can't. I mean, right now it's so frustrating because as soon as I'm speaking to somebody like you, all this stuff runs and hides, and
Yeah.
it's hard to access again. But like later today, it's going to be in full force, so
Yeah.
it's a little frustrating.
Yeah.
But no, you know what? It's not satisfying, and it still feels like I'm not. It's all about protection for me.
Yeah.
I'm afraid. You
Yeah.
know, I'm afraid of loss. I'm afraid of. It's scary to be a little person here in this big universe. It's
Yeah.
terrifying, and it's
Yeah.
horrible in a way from a certain perspective.
So what you need to do on the psychological level is you need to explore that in your story a bit. So on the psychological level, you need to do some investigation into where you feel that feeling of fear, And also when you first started feeling fear and what's happened to you. Because more than likely that fear is more pronounced in you, partly because you're into this subject, but also partly because when you were younger you had a fright and something scared you. It could be a really small fright, but something scared you, and then you've repeated the pattern of being more afraid, and you've got more associated with fear. So you need to investigate that sensation of fear and where it came from. So the first time that you experienced that feeling of being afraid of being in relationship to this big wide world.
I mean, I know exactly what it is. I feel like I've been down that road. I saw it. It was so clear. This little kid's scared, crying on the stairs as his parents fought, and there's alcoholism and all kinds of scary stuff. It's obvious. So now what? It's just.
But the thing is this is where it begins to get really tricky, because so first of all you've got to feel it, but you've got to see that your side effect thought of now what comes from the same pattern, because that keeps you small and afraid and sitting on the stair. So it's like that no is still from the same pattern. You have to see through all of this. You might never change it. I also had a lot of abuse in childhood as well, and I still experience fear in relationship with certain behaviors, a lot of fear. And now it's even worse, the fear. I feel like my body, when I experience a sensation, it's so big, but it's free because there's a movement to who I truly am. But to an extent, you have to see through these fears that they're not true, that these stories aren't true, because otherwise they can't play unconsciously and they're perceived as true, and then there's total involvement of them. So they have to become thin enough to see the freedom in them. But that mentality that you're presenting to me is still the mentality of victim, and you're not that. You aren't the victim. I know that when you've had a fright, particularly from some childhood, it's going to be the biggest battle of your whole entire life, pulling yourself out of that. It's so hard. We should have freaking disability benefits. like not disability as in we're disabled, but we should have benefits to help us readjust to this bloody society after being so traumatized. It's really hard when you haven't come from a steady upbringing. But if it hadn't been, you'd have never got into this subject. The people that get into the subject normally have to have had that, especially this young. I don't know how old you are, but you look younger than me.
Maybe like 2 years. I'm 31.
5 years.
Oh, okay.
But not so much. You're not even a generation apart, but so quite close. You must be 86.
85.
85. Okay, so you've got to go into that sensation of fear, but also see your victim stories on that's saying no. And as that begins to loosen, you'll begin to see that I am, and that consciousness is the freedom. But you're going to have it intense because you've got to re-experience that fear again and again to see it's not true. And I know the stories, which are the victim stories, are going to say, but I've seen this a million times. Why do I have to do this again? But that's a victim. It's like you don't get any way out. You don't get any way out of this. Like if you hadn't had been traumatized as a child and had those things happen as a child, then you wouldn't have that thought that says I can't do it. You'd have been of the more positive that says I can do it. And the people that say I can do it never actually question, and they just stay in their story. So it's great in a way that you have these things, feelings and thoughts coming up, but you have to keep going into it. This awakening is not an easy thing, and at the same time it's so natural and easy. But it's not easy because there has to be an investigation into that place, those places that haunt us. And there has to be that breaking of the cycle of feeling victimized by life and feeling like you can't do it, or feeling exhausted by life, because it's not true. Nothing you think and feel is true. And in seeing it's not true, it might not all dissipate, but you'll remember that consciousness and that I am. That who you truly are is something that never moves and is always free, with all varieties of human experience and all flavors of this dream. Because this dream is the dream of opposites, birth and death. growth and destruction. So nobody gets a free pass through the stream. It's just some people get a free pass for a certain period of years. Especially the growing ones. Those are the ones that are most that when you're growing and your brain is growing. Like when you have those shocks when you're younger, they're the ones that you really have to be like a warrior. You are not victim to anything. And I don't say that as in trying to dismiss what happened. I say it as in that this can be broken through. You have to see all the tricks that the mind is playing. All the tricks.
So I would just sit and revisit what.
Well,
I guess I'm asking you how to do it, which I shouldn't be doing, right?
Well, normally it depends on what mood I'm in as to how I answer. So what can happen is listening to non-duality. So listening to the non-duality, and then also you need to revisit some of the stuff that's stuck in your body. So when you're having thoughts like, I can't do this, or I can't hear this, or you're feeling stuck, you need to follow that into the body and see what's going on in the body and learn what's happening in the body and see that the feelings and thoughts are not true. They are not true. And there's lots of aids out there, so that's more psychological work, but also you can listen to my talks and other speakers' talks, but there's also other books that work on these difficult feelings in the body. And basically, it's not about getting rid of them. It's not about getting rid of them. It's about seeing that they're not true and not giving them the power. They get the power when they're believed to be true, when they're believed to be a reality. And they can be as subtle as I can't do this, or I don't know what she's talking about, I feel lost. Those feel like really real thoughts, but they're thoughts. Even that wall is blue behind you isn't true. It's a thought.
I mean, this has been seen really clearly, don't get me wrong. Like everything you're saying, there's been dips into this.
Yeah.
It's so obvious, and it's like, I guess there's the desire to, it seems like you live in it. You and a few others live there. There's a stabilization, is that correct? There's a stabilization in, say, the brain of Lisa as opposed to the brain of Zach?
Well, it's not really in the brain, but there was a movement that happened. But I still have to address difficult things in life. Like life doesn't just, some teachers say that it all becomes, in one way you could say it all becomes like roses because it's seen who you truly are, which is home, which is this moment. But there's still difficult things that have to be dealt with. Like life is always moving and always changing, and there can be difficult reactions that happen in Lisa, difficult feelings that happen, but it's seen so clearly who I am. And there's not this belief in separation anymore. The who I am is found inside this body. Who I am is this I am and this boundless consciousness. But the character of Lisa can go through difficult things. It's not escape from Lisa or from life on one side, but also it's a remembering of something that was forgotten.
I feel that. I felt that since I was a kid.
Yeah.
Home.
Yeah. And it's in what's happening. And you see those feelings of fear and those thoughts, they're always trying to move the energy into the next moment to get away from something. It's like they're running away. And so it's like seeing that they're not true and that there's something here that's always home and relaxed and free. But it's so subtle.
It is, and that's where I get frustrated.
No, the frustration, you're not frustrated with non-duality. It's frustrated as a past pattern that's repeating. Frustration is an okay thing. I feel frustrated at points, but it's a past pattern that's repeating that has belief in it that's true. It's not seen for what it is, that it's only a sensation that comes and goes. That's it. It's not actually talking about what's happening. It's a biological sensation. So right now, what are you feeling? All over.
I don't know. I don't know. Wideness.
Largeness there.
Yeah.
Nice.
Weirdness. Disassociation. It's because of this conversation, you know.
Yeah, yeah. And what about the body? What's the body feelings? Is it cold, warm, tight?
Energy in the chest area.
Yeah. Is that painful or pleasurable?
It wants to move.
Yeah,
You know what I mean?
yeah. It's so amazing though that all these feelings we're often so unconscious about. Like the body has all this sensation going on, and it's actually the freedom is this movement back to what's actually happening, and the sensations of the body are what's happening. Like the sensations, you could say, are consciousness. All there is sensation happening. So the tip of your fingers now, the bum on the seat, the tightness in the chest. I have a full bladder, so that's what's happening here. So I just keep imagining water at the moment and my drink.
Gosh. Should start doing this from the bathroom.
I have a bathroom like a meter away, so
Oh, there you go.
I'm very close.
So it's just, yeah. I think any question I'm going to have is just an attempt
To get out, yeah.
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 I need to do the work. I guess it's.
But
you know,
don't
I've
be
always-
victim to that work. Don't let that work become something in which you're incapable of doing, because this is the old mentality. This is where you'll get stuck. And the reason that I know it so well is because I don't know your story, but just from what you began to say, I kind of feel like I can more than likely relate. We're all so unique and so different, but it's this mentality of shock that you get as a child, and then you begin to feel like your mind gets into that mentality of it can't do things. So don't let non-duality become this big thing which you can't live up to, because that's not it. Everything is an invitation to investigate. Everything, even that feeling that you can't do it, or feeling that you've got to do the work, is an investigation. That's the very investigation. The sensations that are appearing now, whatever they're telling you.
Also, and this is the last thing I'll say because I don't want to take up too much time. Is I guess this is an attempt to run too, but
It's okay.
I watch and listen to a lot of different teachers, and I don't know if you're familiar with Tony Parsons.
Yeah, yeah.
Like, it's very clear that he says there's no one here.
Yeah.
And I was talking about this in the chat briefly with some others. But it's like, how can a separate self that doesn't really exist? See, you're saying that I can do something to bring about this.
I kind of say it and I don't. I say it and then I debunk it, because actually there isn't somebody there that can do something. But, so saying now, have you got so if I told you something from your table, more than likely that body would pick it up.
Yeah.
Now we take that as free will and our choice to do something, but actually it's not. It's an instrument that's responding. So actually I'm not actually speaking to someone, I'm not giving instruction to someone. You could say it's not a prescription, it's actually a description of what can happen. And what seems to happen prior to awakening, including in Tony Parsons, is the investigation into the nature of reality. But it's actually never someone's doing.
Yes, and I see that very clearly, almost all the time. It's so obvious that there's no free will.
But you've got to be careful. If you're more of got low, you've got to be careful not to be victimized by nobody is doing anything, and let it become and not become an excuse to be apathetic. It's like the person takes on anything they can to maintain its stories, and it's true, but just be wary that nothing's true also, and that the person is always trying to maintain its habits and its safety out of only because it's used to that, not because it produces pleasure in you, but because it's used to it. So people take this idea that there is no doer or there's nothing to do, and they almost use it as a way to beat themselves up. I see it so regularly. It's why I began to change speaking over the last couple of years, and more than likely I'll begin to find a fault in the way I speak now, and eventually I'll change from that. It seems to be what you have to do as a speaker. You have to keep changing it because people just take things on for themselves. So you always have to question and go into the feelings. The feelings will tell you what you're doing. But keep taking it back always. What does this make me feel? When I say there is nobody, what does that make me feel? Sometimes it's like a sadistic feeling, that you're beating yourself up. When I say there is no doer or there is nothing to do, what's that making me feel? Like it's like, what are these things actually making me feel? What am I relating to them? Because it's not actually the person that wakes up. It's that space that's beyond the person. It's that which never leaves. But the person has to deal with itself to a certain extent. Otherwise it will just keep staying in its story. So what are you feeling now? What happened then? What thoughts appeared?
It's just clarity.
Yeah.
And something's breaking a little, in a good way. Thank you.
Oh, it's a pleasure. Nice to speak with you. Finally, I think after last week we kept trying and it kept dying. So nice. Ah, thanks. Thanks for calling, Zach.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.